Look at this badge, son. I'm a major. You're out of line stopping me.
Sir, keep the badge away from my face. License and registration, please.
That isn't a military ID, and you're not a major. Step out of the truck.
Who the hell are you?
Major Harris, U.S. Army, and you're impersonating. Cameras rolling.
This is harassment!
Hands behind your back.
Got it!
You're making a mistake.
The patrol cars rolled in with steady silence. Their lights washed over the gas station lot and turned every surface harsh and cold. The call described a disorderly driver. The man in the sedan acted loud and aggressive. Officers stepped out with steady focus. The suspect stood outside his car and shouted orders at the first responding unit. He claimed he outranked everyone in uniform. He pointed at his chest and yelled that he served this country. His voice shook with anger. The officers stayed calm. The man kept stepping forward. His tone grew sharper. His words hit the air like thrown stones. He refused to hand over his license. He ignored every lawful command. The officers warned him about obstruction. The man smirked and waved his arms. He said no cop had authority over him. Then a dark truck rolled into the lot. A uniformed Army major stepped out. The rank on his chest caught the streetlights and flashed bright. He walked with calm purpose. He stood between the officers and the driver. His voice stayed firm. The driver shouted at him too. The major reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He started recording. The tension climbed higher. The driver's story fell apart with every second. The officers watched in silence. The major delivered a message that shifted the entire scene. The man who bragged about rank stood frozen. His mistake played out on camera. The shift started with steady traffic and routine calls. The night held a cold bite that pressed against the skin. Officer Ryan Torres sat behind the wheel of Unit 14, parked near the south end of town. His partner, Officer Jenna Price, filled out notes on her tablet. The radio stayed quiet. The streets looked calm. Store lights reflected across the pavement. It felt like any other patrol. Then a call came through with clear concern. A gas station manager reported a hostile driver in the lot. The caller described loud threats toward customers and staff. No weapon mentioned, but the voice on the phone sounded shaken. Dispatch assigned Unit 14 to respond. Torres acknowledged the call and pulled away from the curb. The patrol car eased onto the main road. Traffic stayed light. Storefronts rushed past in streaks of white and yellow. Price secured her tablet and sat upright. She scanned the sidewalks and side streets while Torres drove. Neither spoke. They moved with quick purpose. The call sounded like a simple disorderly report, but training taught them to expect sudden changes. The address rested near the interstate ramp, a busy area during the day. Quiet at this hour. The patrol car crossed the last light before the gas station. The lot came into view with bright fluorescent glare and long shadows. A dark sedan sat near Pump 6. A store employee stood near the entrance and waved in panic. Torres parked at a safe distance. He stepped out and kept a watchful stance. Price walked beside him with firm posture. The driver stood outside his sedan. He yelled toward a customer inside a pickup. His voice carried across the lot with sharp force. The man looked in his 40s. His clothes appeared wrinkled. The smell of fuel filled the air. Torres called out with calm authority and asked the driver to step away from the other vehicle. The driver turned and stared with wild eyes. He stomped toward the officers in angry strides. His face stayed tense. His hands shook. Torres halted him at a safe distance. The driver shouted about respect. He said the officers had no authority over him. He held nothing in his hands. He shouted that he outranked every cop in town. Price stayed composed. She asked for his ID. The driver barked back and said he did not answer to anyone here. He pointed at his chest. He declared that he served this nation. Torres kept his voice level. He ordered the man to stop yelling and provide his license. The driver ignored him. The store employee called out from a few feet away and begged for help. The employee said the driver threatened everyone who approached his car. Torres repeated his command. The driver shook his head. He puffed his chest and stepped forward again. Torres raised his hand and warned him. The driver halted for a moment. His breath came out heavy. His tone dropped to a low growl. He demanded that the officers salute him. Price spoke up. She told him no officer saluted without reason, and no one answered demands from a hostile suspect. Her tone stayed solid. The driver cursed at her. He pointed again at his chest and said he held a rank above all patrol units. He never offered proof. He never complied. Torres signaled for backup. The radio crackled with an acknowledgement. The driver kept pacing and yelling. His words hit the air in bursts of anger. Customers inside the store watched through the glass with nervous faces. The clerk stood frozen near the register. Price tried once more to request ID. She asked with clear authority and a measured tone. The driver mocked her voice and told her to stand at attention. Torres saw his stance shift. The driver leaned toward Price in a quick motion. Torres stepped in front and blocked the path. The driver stepped back and raised his hands like he wanted a camera that was not there. He yelled that he knew his rights and demanded the officers kneel. The backup unit arrived with quiet speed. 2 more officers stepped out and approached. They spread out across the lot to control space. The lights from the second patrol car washed the sedan in a bright red glow. The driver grew louder. He shouted about medals and service. He said every officer present needed to respect his authority. He refused to give a name. He refused to verify any claim. His voice cracked from shouting. His eyes darted from officer to officer. He stayed on edge, but he did not retreat. Torres gave one more warning. He informed the driver he faced arrest for obstruction if he refused lawful commands. The driver smirked and rolled his shoulders. He shouted that no cop in this town had the backbone to arrest a veteran. He kicked at the pavement in frustration. Torres told him to place his hands on the hood of the sedan. The driver shook his head. He said the police should place their hands there instead. Torres reached for cuffs. Price moved in to assist. The driver backed up and raised his fists. He never swung, yet the threat appeared clear. Torres ordered him to drop his hands to his sides. The driver held his arms stiff. The lot stayed tense. Every second waited to erupt. The store clerk stepped closer to the door but stayed inside. Customers recorded on their phones. The driver shouted toward them. He ordered them to stop filming. He said he held top rank and no one could record him without clearance. Price stepped left and cut off his retreat. Torres stepped right and blocked the space near pump 5. The driver kept yelling. He said his rank gave him immunity. The officers focused on his hands and his stance. It looked like he held a choice in his mind. Fight or surrender. Then the scene shifted. A dark truck rolled into the lot. It parked near the curb. The door opened and a uniformed Army major stepped out. His stride looked firm. The rank on his chest left no doubt. His face stayed serious. His steps carried purpose. He approached the officers without haste. Torres kept his eyes on the suspect and watched the major from the corner of his vision. The major stopped near the edge of the group and spoke to Price in a low voice. Price nodded and stepped aside. The major did not raise his tone. He faced the driver with steady calm. The driver stared at the major with sudden confusion. His voice softened for a second. He asked who the major thought he was. The major replied with short sentences. He said false claims of rank insulted actual service members. He asked the driver to stop yelling. The driver snapped again and pointed at his chest. He insisted he outranked the major, too. He demanded respect. The major did not flinch. He pulled his phone from his pocket and held it up. The record light blinked. The major told the man that stolen valor carried legal consequences. The driver froze. His hands twitched. His voice dropped off. Torres saw the shift take hold. Confidence drained from the suspect. The presence of the major cut through the driver's act with sharp force. The suspect breathed through clenched teeth and tried to form new lies. The major asked his name. The driver stalled. He said nothing. The major told him the phone recorded every word and movement. The suspect looked over each officer. He looked at each camera facing him. The weight of his lies pressed against the moment. The major told him to place his hands on the hood of the sedan. The suspect obeyed. Price stepped in and secured his wrists. The cuffs clicked tight. The suspect lowered his head. His shoulders sagged. The fight left his body. Torres read him his charges. The suspect offered no resistance. The major ended the recording and holstered his phone. The officers guided the suspect to a patrol car. The store clerk stepped outside with relief. Torres thanked the major. The major nodded and said false claims harmed real service members who gave their lives to duty. He said respect belonged to those who earned it. Price asked if the major wanted to give a statement. The major agreed. He walked with the officers to the side of the lot where headlights did not glare. The suspect sat locked in the back seat. His eyes stared at the floor. His voice stayed silent. The store returned to calm. Customers relaxed. The clerk resumed work behind the counter. The radio cleared with brief updates from dispatch. Torres watched the scene settle and felt the shift in the air. The major provided a detailed account. He spoke with clarity. He said he served for many years and understood military conduct. He explained that the suspect had no insignia, no ID, no proof of rank. His behavior failed every standard. Torres wrote down the statement. Price secured the scene and checked the sedan for registration. She found no military documents inside. She found an expired license in the glove compartment. She handed it to Torres. The suspect sat still without a word. The charges included obstruction, disorderly conduct, and false representation of rank. The store clerk thanked the officers again and locked up for the night. The backup unit transported the suspect to the station. Torres and Price stayed behind to finish paperwork. The major leaned against his truck, arms crossed. He stared at the sedan and shook his head. He told Torres that stolen valor harmed every soldier who served with honor. He said the uniform demanded honesty and sacrifice. He said those who faked rank disgraced every fallen soldier buried under the flag. Torres listened with respect. The major spoke with steady words. He never raised his voice. He never gloated. His record spoke through action, not noise. Price finished with the paperwork and offered the major a copy of his recorded statement. The major declined and said the video sat backed up on his phone. He said he would provide it upon request. The officers appreciated his help. They shook his hand. The major stepped into his truck. He paused before closing the door. He said the suspect needed to learn that respect grew from truth, not loud threats. He drove off with quiet control. Torres and Price stood near the patrol car and watched the night settle. The clerk finished locking the doors. Streetlights hummed as the lot returned to silence. Torres breathed out and felt the weight of the moment lift. Price said they needed fuel and planned to return to patrol after refilling the car. They pulled up to pump 7. Price stepped out and started fueling. Torres checked the dashboard camera. He tagged and stored the footage for evidence. He saw the suspect's first burst of aggression. He saw the moment the major arrived. The recording captured the shift in the suspect's attitude. Fuel filled the tank. Price secured the cap. She gave a nod toward the station doors and said the clerk looked calmer now. Torres agreed. They pulled away from the pumps and eased onto the main road. Traffic stayed thin. Tower lights flickered in the distance. The sky held low clouds with a dull glow from the city. Torres drove with steady focus. Price reviewed the notes once more. She verified each detail of the arrest. The radio stayed quiet for a mile. Then dispatch informed them of a possible family disturbance at a small apartment near the river. Torres acknowledged. They headed south and crossed the old steel bridge. Inside the patrol car, neither spoke for a minute. The last call lingered in their minds. They understood moments of pride and moments of shame lived side by side on the streets. Some boasted. Some served. Some lied. Some sacrificed everything. The major's face stayed clear in Torres's thoughts. A calm soldier stepping forward with quiet strength. A steady man who did not yell and did not need to. A recorded truth stronger than any staged claim. The patrol car turned onto Whitewater Avenue. Apartment buildings lined the street. Dim porch lights marked each entrance. Torres slowed to scan numbers. The call came from Building 49. A small crowd stood near the corner. A woman waved for assistance. Torres parked. Price stepped out first and asked who made the call. A neighbor said the disturbance came from the second-floor unit. Voices inside sounded angry. Objects hit the walls. Torres nodded and led the way upstairs. A door stood slightly open. Lights flickered inside. A man paced across the living room. A woman stood near the couch with her hands clenched. Torres knocked and announced his presence. The man turned and threw his hands up in frustration. He yelled about money, rent, and stress. He did not threaten anyone. He did not hold anything dangerous. Price stepped in and spoke with the woman. The woman said the argument escalated, but no assault occurred. She asked for peace and requested that the officers stay until things settled. Torres spoke with the man. The man's anger faded into exhaustion. He apologized. He sat on a chair and dropped his head. Price comforted the woman. The room grew calm. The officers remained with them for a few minutes. Once the tension broke, the couple agreed to separate for the rest of the night. The man would sleep on the couch. The woman would lock the bedroom door for space. Torres documented the incident and cleared the call. The officers stepped outside. A cool breeze brushed across the street. The city lights glowed with low intensity. The neighbors retreated to their homes. The officers returned to their patrol car and continued the shift. Hours passed with traffic stops and patrol checks. The suspect from the gas station stayed locked in holding. Price received confirmation of his record. He had a history of public outbursts and false claims. No military service. No record of enlistment. He told the same story many times across different towns. Near dawn, the shift reached its end. Torres and Price returned to the station. They filed reports with careful detail. They attached the dashboard footage and the statement from the major. They wrote professional summaries of each event. Torres printed a copy of the arrest sheet and placed it in the folder. Price sent her notes to the district attorney's office. The sun began to rise. Soft pink light touched the horizon. Most of the city slept. Torres placed his badge in his locker and grabbed his jacket. Price stretched her shoulders and yawned. Another night finished. More calls would come tomorrow. More noise. More conflict. More truth. Torres walked through the station lobby. The night crew replaced the morning crew. Fresh coffee steamed in paper cups. A sergeant asked for an update on the gas station case. Torres described the arrest and the video from the major. The sergeant raised his eyebrows and said the footage would help with prosecution. Torres nodded. He stepped outside and breathed in the morning air. Price walked beside him to the parking lot. She said the major showed real integrity. Torres agreed. He hoped the suspect learned something. He doubted it. Some people held tight to lies. Some never changed. Price unlocked her car and waved goodbye. Torres walked to his cruiser for the drive home. He planned to sleep for a few hours. Then he would wake up and repeat the cycle. He held no illusions about the job. Some nights held routine. Some held chaos. Some held quiet heroes who stepped in without hesitation. Torres started his engine. The city passed by in slow motion. The sky brightened. A new day waited. Duty would return. The work would continue with steady resolve. Chapter 1 ended, and the next story waited to unfold. The lies at the gas station turned into evidence. The truth stood firm on video. A man who boasted about rank left in handcuffs. A real officer of the United States Army walked away with dignity. The streets remembered every second. The next night brought new stress across the city. A weather front rolled in from the west. Cold air swept through the streets and rattled loose signs above storefronts. Patrol units received warnings about slick roads and reduced visibility. Officer Torres arrived early. He checked his gear and reviewed updates from the previous shift. The suspect from the gas station stayed in the county jail. Charges moved forward. A request for the major's video went out that morning. The report gained attention from supervisors. False claims of rank always struck a nerve within law enforcement. Patrol supervisors liked clear evidence. The video made the case hard to dispute. Price walked into the squad room with a cup of coffee. Her face showed fatigue from limited sleep. She greeted Torres with a short nod and placed her tablet on the desk. The sergeant briefed the team on active concerns: a missing juvenile, a burglary pattern near the industrial park, a spike in drunk driving arrests near the interstate access points. The weather raised the risk of collisions. The sergeant asked all units to stay alert and respond fast to stranded drivers. Heavy trucks rolled through town every night due to highway construction outside the county. Clear communication remained the priority. Torres and Price stepped into the patrol car. The heater pushed warm air through the vents. The windows fogged, then cleared. Price checked the dispatch log. Torres waited for the radio to open. They pulled out of the station and entered the downtown corridor. Business signs flickered with weak bulbs. Cold wind rushed along the sidewalk. The smell of damp asphalt filled the air. Their first assignment involved a welfare check near a bus terminal. A caller reported a teenager sitting on a bench for hours without movement. Torres turned toward the terminal and scanned the lot. They arrived to find a young male in a hooded sweatshirt. His face looked pale. His backpack sat at his feet. Torres stepped out and approached with slow steps. Price stood behind him for support. The teen spoke with low volume. He said he waited for a friend who never arrived. He looked lost and cold. His eyes showed fear that he tried to hide. Torres asked for a name. The teen answered with hesitation. He said his mother lived 2 cities away and expected him to return that night. Torres asked if he wanted help. The teen nodded. Price found a contact number in the system. She called the mother and confirmed the situation. The mother said she would drive over and pick him up. The officers waited until she arrived. The teen climbed into her car and hugged her tight. She thanked the officers and drove home. Another call cleared without conflict. Torres returned to patrol. Price documented the welfare check. Rain started to fall in thin sheets across the windshield. The wipers wiped in steady intervals. Streetlights glowed soft in the water. Traffic slowed across each major road. Patrol units scattered across the district for visibility. An alert reached dispatch about a small fire behind a warehouse. Torres sped toward the location at moderate speed. The warehouse sat near the river. Cargo containers lined the back lot. Smoke rose from a pile of cardboard stacked near a metal door. Flames burned low. The fire spread across the edges of the pile. No workers appeared on site. Price grabbed an extinguisher from the trunk. Torres cleared the area and checked for accelerants or hazards. Price sprayed the flames until the fire died. The smoke cleared. Torres found no sign of forced entry. It looked like discarded packaging left near a vent. Heat from the vent likely ignited the pile. Torres called the fire department to inspect the scene. The crew arrived and ensured the building remained safe. The lieutenant thanked Torres and Price. The officers left and returned to patrol with damp uniforms and tired eyes. The next call struck harder. A frantic driver called dispatch reporting a stalled car on the interstate bridge. Heavy trucks moved across the lanes at high speed. One wrong move could create a pile of wreckage. Torres hit the lights and siren. Price warned dispatch and requested traffic control. The patrol car raced through intersections. Rain reduced visibility. The bridge loomed ahead with flashing hazards. A small sedan sat at a standstill near the guardrail. Trucks passed with loud roars and gusts of wind. Torres positioned the patrol car behind the stalled sedan. Price set cones and guided traffic into the next lane. The driver stayed inside, gripping the steering wheel. His face looked pale. His hands shook. Torres approached and tapped on the window. The man lowered the glass and said his engine died without warning. Torres told him to shift into neutral. The patrol car pushed the sedan to the shoulder and out of danger. Price checked the man's vitals. He looked shaken but stable. He thanked the officers for saving his life. Torres notified a tow truck company. Once the tow arrived, the officers cleared the scene. Their shift continued with routine stops. A reckless driver near a school zone. A suspicious vehicle parked behind a closed tire shop. A report of loud music in a neighborhood where residents often worked night shifts. The city kept moving with low energy and constant noise. Torres and Price handled each call with patience. Hours passed. Shortly after midnight, dispatch alerted all units to a disturbance outside a veteran support center near the east side. Reports described a confrontation in the parking lot involving 2 men. One carried a duffel bag and shouted across the lot. The second man tried to calm him down. The caller worked at the center and feared the conflict would escalate. Torres drove toward the location with caution. Rain reduced to mist. The support center sat near a row of abandoned offices with cracked windows and faded paint. The parking lot held 2 cars and a flickering street lamp. 2 men stood near the entrance. One paced in tight circles while waving his arms. The other kept a distance and tried to reason with him. Torres stepped out and approached. Price moved to the side for cover. The pacing man hurled insults at the sky. His voice carried anger mixed with heartbreak. His duffel bag lay open on the ground. Clothes and personal items spilled out. A military patch rested near the curb. The calm man explained that the pacing man served overseas and struggled with injuries and stress. He said the man received help from the support center, but tonight he snapped after a disagreement inside. Torres stepped closer and spoke with a steady tone. He told the pacing man no one wanted to hurt him. The pacing man kept yelling. His eyes held pain. His hands trembled. Torres saw a flash of fear behind the anger. The man shouted about broken promises. He said no one cared about him outside the battlefield. He said the system left him behind. His voice cracked. He dropped to his knees and cried. Torres lowered his stance and kept a calm distance. He told the man that help existed. He said people inside the support center cared. Price requested medical assistance. The calm man placed a hand on the pacing man's shoulder. The pacing man stopped yelling. He cried in silence. Paramedics arrived. They spoke gently and offered support. The pacing man agreed to ride with them to a clinic. Torres picked up his duffel bag and handed it to the paramedics. The calm man thanked the officers. The support center staff arrived and said they would follow up with him the next day. Once the ambulance left, Torres and Price returned to their patrol car. The scene weighed on both of them. Price stared out the window. Torres thought about the gas station incident. He remembered the major's firm voice. The major spoke with pride, not arrogance. His presence brought clarity to a chaotic scene. The man in the parking lot showed the opposite side of service. A soldier who returned home with pain and confusion. The job taught Torres that uniforms did not guarantee peace. Some carried invisible wounds no one could see. The patrol car rolled farther east. Traffic died down. The rain stopped. The streets glistened under the glow of streetlights. Price checked her tablet for incoming calls. A burglary alarm triggered at a pawn shop near the north end. Torres activated the siren and accelerated. The pawn shop sat near a strip mall. When they arrived, the front door stood locked. No broken windows. No signs of forced entry. The alarm system triggered due to a faulty sensor. Torres documented the false alarm and moved on. Minutes later, dispatch informed all units of a possible stolen vehicle spotted near the riverfront. A witness saw a pickup with a smashed tail light. The owner reported theft an hour earlier. Torres drove toward the riverfront park. The pickup sat near a picnic area with headlights off. Torres parked down the block and approached on foot. Price followed with a flashlight scanning the dark. A man sat in the driver's seat. His head rested on the steering wheel. Torres knocked on the window. The man lifted his head and looked shocked. He admitted the truck belonged to his brother. He said he took it without permission. He said he needed space after a family fight. Torres confirmed the vehicle matched the stolen vehicle report. The man surrendered and walked out with hands visible. Price cuffed him. The tow truck arrived and transported the vehicle. The suspect faced charges for unauthorized use and possession of controlled pills found in the center console. As the night moved toward morning, Torres and Price returned to the station to process evidence. The sky turned dark blue with streaks of gray. Wind stirred across the lot. They filled out reports and prepared the arrest sheet. The jail received the suspect. Torres finished the paperwork and leaned back in his chair. His muscles felt tight. His eyes burned from fatigue. A knock came at the squad room door. The sergeant entered and said a visitor waited in the lobby. Torres stepped outside and saw the major from the previous night. He wore civilian clothes. His posture stayed straight. His voice remained calm. He handed Torres a USB drive with a copy of the video. He said it included audio and clear images of the suspect's behavior. Torres thanked him. The major asked how the case progressed. Torres explained the suspect stayed in custody and faced charges. The major nodded. He said he hoped the court recognized the damage caused by false claims. Price joined them and thanked the major for his help. The major asked if the department needed anything else. Torres said the video completed the evidence package. The major looked tired. His eyes showed concern. He said the city held two types of service members, those who honored sacrifice and those who exploited it. He said the truth needed protection. Torres agreed. The major shook their hands and left. Torres returned to his desk and secured the USB drive. Price printed chain of custody forms. The sergeant praised their work and said the evidence would stand strong at trial. Torres thought about the teenager at the bus terminal, the pacing man outside the support center, the stolen truck, the warehouse fire, the storm, Each moment carried weight. Each person carried a story. As sunrise approached, dispatch announced an urgent call. A crash occurred near the South Industrial Park. 2 vehicles collided at an intersection. Possible injuries. Torres and Price hurried to the patrol car. They drove fast but safe. Rainwater still covered the roads. The industrial park appeared empty except for a few trucks. They found 2 sedans crumpled in the intersection. One sat against a street sign with smoke rising from the hood. The other spun out and rested near a ditch. Torres rushed to the first vehicle. A woman sat behind the wheel. Her eyes blinked with confusion. The airbag deployed and pinned her in place. She breathed but felt disoriented. Price radioed for paramedics and fire units. Torres carefully checked for leaks. He kept the woman calm. She said a truck pulled out in front of her. She tried to brake but lost traction on the wet road. She cried from shock but stayed conscious. Paramedics arrived and removed her from the car with care. Price moved to the second sedan. A teenaged male stood outside with a bruised forehead. He apologized and said he misjudged the distance. He panicked and swerved. His car skidded into the ditch. He said he only wanted to drive home from a friend's house. Paramedics checked him and found no serious injury. His parents arrived minutes later and took him home after officers cleared the scene. The woman from the first vehicle left in the ambulance for further tests. Torres documented the crash. Price took photos of both cars and the skid marks. The fire crew cleared the engines. Tow trucks removed the damaged cars. The intersection returned to silence. Torres let out a deep breath. Price rubbed her neck. The shift reached its end. The sergeant called in and asked for a full crash report by morning. Torres agreed. They drove back to the station, tired and cold. They entered the briefing room. Torres reviewed footage from his body camera. Price processed the crash report. The sergeant reviewed the case files from the night. Torres filed the USB drive from the major. The evidence locker received the chain of custody confirmation. The paperwork cleared. Torres leaned back and felt the weight of exhaustion settle through his shoulders. The sky outside turned brighter. Officers from the next shift walked in with fresh faces and hot coffee. Torres briefed them on the crash and the welfare checks. Price passed along updates about the support center case. The replacement team thanked them for the smooth transition. The sergeant approached Torres before he left. He said the prosecutor reviewed the gas station report and planned to pursue charges without delay. The video sealed the case. The prosecutor requested a copy of the body camera footage by midday. Torres said he would send it before going home. Price stood near the lockers. She gathered her bag and said the shift tested every bit of patience she had left. Torres agreed. She opened the station door and stepped outside. Torres followed. The morning air felt cold but calm. Clouds scattered across the sky. Streetlights flickered off. They walked to their cars. Price waved goodbye. Torres watched her drive away. He sat in his own car and rested his head against the seat. Every call from the night replayed in his mind. The anger, the fear, the relief when things did not spiral beyond control. He wondered how the major felt after witnessing someone fake service. He wondered if the pacing man outside the support center found peace. Torres drove home on quiet streets. The city slowed down as daylight took hold. Houses sat still, yards soaked with rain. Dogs barked behind fences. Torres parked in his driveway. His house looked small and plain, but it felt like refuge. He stepped inside, removed his boots, and placed his badge on the kitchen counter. He poured a glass of water and drank slowly. His body felt heavy. His thoughts rested on the people he met during the shift. The victim at the crash. The teenager who waited alone at the bus terminal. The man who took his brother's truck. The soldier who broke down outside the support center. Every moment showed a different layer of human struggle. Torres walked into his bedroom and collapsed onto the bed. His eyes closed within seconds. The world faded into quiet darkness. The next shift would come fast. New calls, new noise, new lives crossing his path. The case from the gas station remained open. The major's evidence waited in the system. The truth stood firm. The suspect's lies no longer held power. The city moved forward with slow patience, and the officers who guarded it prepared to answer again when the radio called. The next week arrived with fresh calls and longer shifts. Officer Torres returned to duty with steady focus. He moved through patrol briefings with calm posture and few words. The gas station case moved toward court. The prosecutor prepared charges with confidence. The major's video sat in the evidence vault with timestamps and chain of custody forms. The suspect stayed in custody without bond. Public defenders reviewed his history and prepared statements. Torres left legal progress to the court and focused on new tasks. Rain returned on Monday night. Thick clouds blocked the moon. Patrols switched to night visibility protocols. Torres checked his cruiser and wiped moisture from the windshield. Officer Price adjusted her vest and placed her tablet on the dashboard mount. Dispatch warned all units about street flooding near the docks. Small drains often filled with debris during storms. Patrol units needed to clear any roadblocks that trapped vehicles. Torres drove through downtown with slow precision. The shift began with traffic stops for broken lights and expired plates. Drivers moved nervous along slick roads, afraid of hydroplaning. Torres carried patience through each interaction. Price documented warnings with short entries. The situation shifted near the east side when dispatch issued a call from a grocery store manager. A man entered the store and shouted racial slurs at employees. Staff locked down the aisles and moved customers to the front. The man walked in circles near the frozen section. He yelled at anyone who looked his way. No weapon mentioned, but his tone turned violent. Torres arrived with lights off to avoid panic. Price scanned the lot with a flashlight. The store manager waved from behind the glass doors with frightened eyes. Torres entered first. The man stood at the end of aisle 4. He ripped open a soda bottle and poured it across the floor. An employee tried to mop the spill, but the man kicked the bucket away. The employee backed off and raised his hands in surrender. Torres gave a direct command. The man froze for a second, then turned and shouted about government corruption. His voice hit high pitches. His arms flailed wildly. Price stepped to his left and blocked the exit. The man tried to push a cart toward Torres. Torres shoved it aside and stepped forward. He grabbed the man's wrist and pinned him against a shelf. The man kicked at the floor and cursed. Price cuffed his hands behind his back. The manager thanked them through shaky breaths. No injuries occurred. The man faced charges for disorderly conduct and damage to property. The clerk requested a report number for insurance. Torres wrote a short summary and cleared the call. A tow truck hauled away a vehicle that belonged to the suspect. Torres returned to the patrol car and drove toward the industrial park for a property check. Rain beat hard against the roof. The radio carried static. Wind shook loose branches along the sidewalks. Dispatch alerted him to a lost hiker near the woods south of town. A woman called and said her brother left for a short walk and never returned. The sun had set hours earlier. The woods stretched across a mile of dark terrain with few trails. Torres took the call without hesitation. He headed south with caution. Price activated the spotlight and scanned the roadside. The entrance to the woods appeared near a gravel pull-off. A sedan sat alone under a street lamp. The woman waited inside with tears running down her cheeks. She stepped out and told Torres her brother suffered panic attacks at times. He took short hikes to calm himself. He promised to return before nightfall. Hours passed without contact. His phone went straight to voicemail. Torres radioed for a search team. Time mattered. Night brought lower temperatures and slick ground. Search units arrived with dogs and flashlights. Torres led the teams through dense brush. Price marked paths with reflective tape. Minutes stretched without progress. Rain soaked uniforms and dripped from branches. The dogs tracked a scent toward a ridge. Torres slipped on wet leaves but stayed upright. The dogs pulled forward. Price called out that she saw movement near a fallen tree. Torres raised his flashlight. A young man sat against a trunk with his knees to his chest. His eyes stared into nothing. He shook from fear and cold. Torres knelt beside him and placed a blanket over his shoulders. The man whispered that he lost his footing and slid down the ridge. His phone slipped out of his hand and disappeared in the mud. Darkness pressed against his mind. Thoughts spiraled. He froze and waited for daylight. Torres helped him stand. Price radioed the search team. Paramedics met them at the trail entrance. The man hugged his sister before entering the ambulance. The call cleared with relief. Torres wiped rain from his face and caught his breath. Price checked her watch. Hours passed with little rest. They returned to the patrol car. The heater blasted warm air. Torres took a sip from a water bottle and drove back toward town. Streetlights glowed against puddles. Night traffic slowed across the main corridors. At 2:14 a.m., dispatch announced a robbery in progress at a late-night diner near the river. 2 suspects carried masks and threatened staff. One held a metal pipe. The other carried a broken bottle. No gun mentioned, but the threat level remained high. Torres drove fast yet controlled. Price called for backup. Sirens echoed across the streets. When they arrived, 2 employees crouched near the kitchen door. They pointed toward the dining area. Torres peeked through the window. The first suspect shouted at the cashier and demanded money. The cashier trembled and handed over a small stack of bills. The second suspect smashed salt shakers and shouted for customers to lay on the floor. No customers resisted. Fear filled the room. Torres counted the risks. Price found a line of sight through the side window. Backup units arrived and spread across the lot. Torres signaled with a hand gesture. Price nodded. They entered fast and controlled. Torres tackled the first suspect near the counter. The suspect dropped the pipe and hit the ground. Price secured the second suspect with the help of backup. The broken bottle fell and shattered. No one suffered cuts. Officers cuffed both suspects and walked them to patrol cars. The cashier cried with relief. The cook hugged him. Torres asked for a quick summary of events. The cashier explained that the suspects entered through the back door and surprised them. They shouted threats but never struck anyone. Torres documented the scene while Price recovered the broken pieces of glass. Detectives arrived with evidence bags. Photos captured every angle of the diner. One customer gave a statement about the suspects' voices and coats. Torres provided the report number to staff and cleared the call. The shift continued with property checks and radar patrols. Bridges dripped from heavy rainfall. Traffic cones lined construction zones. The air smelled like wet concrete. Torres kept his mind sharp. Price reviewed reports between calls. They made a strong team, steady and cautious. Near dawn, dispatch announced a call from a distressed driver near a strip mall. The driver said someone knocked on his window with a weapon. Torres responded with his lights on low beam. Price scanned the parking area with her flashlight. They found a pickup with a shattered side mirror. The driver sat inside and shook. He said a stranger approached his window and demanded cash. The driver refused to roll down the window. The stranger struck the mirror with a metal rod and ran north toward an alley. Torres called for backup and moved toward the alley. He saw footprints in the mud. Price pointed toward a dumpster where she heard movement. Torres approached and drew his weapon in a controlled stance. A young man hopped out and tried to sprint down a side path. Torres chased him. Rain-soaked pavement slowed the runner. Torres grabbed his jacket and drove him into a fence. The young man yelled and twisted but failed to escape. Torres cuffed him while reading charges. Price searched the alley and found a metal rod behind the dumpster. Backup units arrived. The victim identified the suspect. Officers placed the rod into an evidence bag. The suspect faced charges for attempted robbery and vandalism. The sky turned pale. The rain eased. Torres cleared the scene and returned to the station for processing. He stood at a computer terminal and typed his report. Price organized evidence files and printed booking sheets. The sergeant reviewed highlights from the night and signed paperwork. Torres stretched his shoulders and rubbed his eyes. Fatigue pressed hard, though he hid it behind calm posture. After finishing reports, Torres stepped outside for fresh air. Dawn peeked over rooftops. The streets glowed with new light. He breathed steady and recentered his thoughts. He planned to head home after a short rest period in the locker room. Price joined him outside and thanked him for taking the lead during the diner robbery. Torres brushed it off. He said teamwork kept things smooth. Their shift ended, and Torres drove home. Before he could sleep, the phone rang. A message from the prosecutor's office requested a meeting that afternoon. The major also left a message and said he wanted to provide extra context about false rank claims in the region. Torres agreed to meet before court. He reached his house, locked the door, and slept for a few hours. Later that day, Torres put on clean clothes and drove to the courthouse. The prosecutor greeted him in a small office. He thanked Torres for the fast body camera submission and reviewed key details. 2 defense attorneys requested plea negotiations, though nothing final settled yet. The prosecutor planned to show the major's video in court. The jury would see the suspect's behavior without distortion. Torres left the courthouse and walked across the street to a small coffee shop where the major waited. The major stood near a window booth with a binder on the table. He shook Torres's hand and invited him to sit. Torres ordered water and listened. The major explained that false rank claims triggered emotional harm in veteran communities. Real soldiers saw copycats steal honor from graves. The major said his goal stretched beyond charges. He wanted to raise awareness inside the city. He hoped the court recognized the bigger picture. Torres understood. He thought about the soldier outside the support center. Pain lived behind his eyes. His service left scars no one could count. The major said stolen valor harmed morale and trust. Torres agreed. The major provided copies of discharge papers and a service record. He offered to testify if required. Torres thanked him and passed the documents to the prosecutor's office. Evening approached. Torres rotated back into uniform and returned to the station. A new shift waited. Price sat at a desk checking reports from the day crew. She raised her eyebrows when Torres mentioned the major's involvement in outreach meetings. Price said that kind of step helped veterans feel seen. Torres agreed once again. Neither used flowery words. Clear thoughts served them better. The radio crackled. Dispatch described a missing child near the north suburb. Officers from nearby districts started a search. Torres joined the response without delay. He drove through wet streets as daylight faded. Residents walked with flashlights and blankets. Parents shouted names into yards. Torres exited his cruiser and questioned neighbors. A mother trembled with fear near her porch. She said her son left the yard to chase a stray dog and never returned. The dog collar hung from her hand. Torres called for a K-9 officer. The dog picked up a scent near a watery ditch. Torres followed the line of search with boots heavy in the mud. Price moved through brush and scanned gaps between fences. The dog barked near a drainage pipe. Torres dropped to his knees and shined a flashlight inside. 2 small eyes blinked back. A young boy crawled forward with wet shoes and scraped elbows. Torres lifted him out and wrapped his jacket around him. The mother sprinted across the yard and hugged her son. She sobbed with relief. Torres stepped back to give them space. Price notified dispatch that the child remained safe. The crowd calmed. Neighbors thanked the officers. The mother carried her son inside. The K-9 officer patted the dog and praised his work. Torres returned to the cruiser, breathed deep and wiped mud from his sleeves. Each call tested patience and judgment. Each resolution restored a small piece of balance. The night moved on with fewer emergencies. Patrol units parked near gas stations and bus stops. Torres checked on a homeless encampment under a bridge. A man sat near a shopping cart with blankets. Torres approached and offered food from a supply pack inside the trunk. The man accepted and thanked him with a quiet voice. Price photographed graffiti on the bridge and sent images to the gang unit. Torres wished the homeless man a safe night and returned to the patrol car. Minutes later, a stalled truck blocked a railroad crossing. The driver stood outside waving for assistance. Torres helped push the truck clear of the tracks with the help of another driver. A freight train passed 2 minutes later. The driver thanked Torres and left with a tow truck. The shift inched toward dawn again. Dispatch released a brief code for officer wellness checks across the district. Torres keyed his mic and responded with a calm voice. Price sipped water and stretched her wrists. Their shift reached the final hour. Fewer cars moved through the city. The heavy rain lightened into scattered drops. They returned to the station at daybreak. Torres wrote final notes. Price forwarded reports to detectives. The sergeant reviewed overnight events and expressed relief that no major injuries occurred. Torres placed his badge in his locker and rubbed his tired eyes. The couch in the report room looked tempting, but he forced his legs to stay steady. Work demanded structure. He finished each step before rest. Outside, the city woke under a gray sky. Workers drove to early shifts. School buses rolled through intersections. Torres walked toward his car with slow steps. Price waved, then drove toward home. Torres entered his house and lowered himself onto the couch. He felt safe in silence. Evidence from the gas station case stayed in secure storage. The major's testimony waited for the court schedule. Streets settled for the moment. Trouble would rise again, though officers stood ready. Torres closed his eyes and fell into deep sleep. His body rested while his mind replayed each call. Fear, anger, relief. Every shift held pieces of each. His mission stayed simple: protect the city, uphold truth without theatrics, honor those who earned respect, stop those who pretended. The court date for the gas station suspect approached. Justice moved slow but steady. Torres waited for the next radio call, the next night, the next moment when lives tilted toward danger. The city breathed through storms and sirens. The streets held stories without ends, and Officer Torres prepared to face them with calm strength rooted in duty. Court day arrived with low clouds and cold air. Officer Torres dressed in his pressed uniform and drove to the courthouse before the morning rush. The hallway outside the courtroom filled with lawyers, clerks, and defendants waiting for their hearings. The gas station suspect sat on a bench next to two public defenders. His face looked drained. His posture sagged. Gone was the loud bravado that filled the night of his arrest. Torres walked past without reaction. The prosecutor arrived a few minutes later. He carried a folder and nodded to Torres. The major entered soon after, wearing a clean suit and holding the same calm stance he showed at the gas station. He greeted Torres with a firm handshake. Court began with a long list of minor cases. Then the bailiff called the gas station case. Everyone stepped forward. The prosecutor played the video recorded by the major. The screen showed the suspect shouting, pacing, cursing, and bragging about rank. The judge watched with narrowed eyes. The courtroom stayed silent. Then the dashboard footage displayed the confrontation and arrest. The defendant slumped lower in his chair. His attorneys whispered, likely urging him to cooperate. The major testified next. His tone stayed steady. He described real military conduct and the damage caused by false claims. He gave facts, not emotion. His testimony cut through the room like a sharp blade. The judge called for a brief recess. The defense asked for a plea agreement. The suspect pled guilty to disorderly conduct and obstruction. Fines and probation followed. The judge ordered counseling and barred him from wearing uniforms or claiming rank. The suspect nodded in silence. The courtroom adjourned. Outside, Torres thanked the major again. The major said the case offered a reminder. Honor lives in actions, not boasts. He placed a hand on Torres's shoulder and left without fanfare. Torres watched him walk down the courthouse steps. No cameras, no speeches, just quiet integrity. Torres returned to duty that afternoon. His patrol car waited outside the station. Officer Price sat in the passenger seat. She carried a folder with updates from overnight operations. Torres placed his hat on the dashboard and started the engine. The radio buzzed before they reached the street. A delivery truck jackknifed near the highway off-ramp. Traffic backed up for blocks. Emergency crews needed patrol units to direct cars through alternate routes. Torres headed to the scene. Rain sprinkled the asphalt. The truck lay sideways across 2 lanes. The driver stood by the guardrail with a bruise under his eye. He swore the brakes locked without warning. Patrol officers moved traffic cones and guided vehicles around the wreck. No fire, no spill. Tow crews prepared to upright the trailer. Price took statements while Torres cleared the shoulder. A sedan pulled too close and hit a cone. The driver cursed through the window and stomped on the gas. Torres flagged him down and issued a citation for reckless movement in an active collision zone. The driver argued, but Torres stayed firm. The ticket stood. After traffic cleared, Torres and Price resumed patrol. The city felt tense. Storms always shook the nerves of drivers and residents. They passed neighborhoods with children walking home from school under umbrellas. Torres slowed near each crosswalk. Safety first, No shortcuts. Late afternoon brought a call from a restaurant on Elm Street. A man argued with the manager about a bill. He slammed his fist on the counter and shouted at customers. Torres entered with calm authority. The man pointed at his plate and claimed the food tasted spoiled. The manager explained he already offered a refund, but the man continued yelling and demanded free meals for life. Torres guided him outside. The man refused at first, but a direct command ended his resistance. Torres handed him a trespass notice and told him to leave the property. The man stormed off, shouting at the sky. Next came a call about a stolen bike near a school playground. A young girl cried at the swing set. She said someone took her bike while she played with friends. Torres wrote a report and promised to search the area. Price found tire tracks behind a row of houses. They followed the path and discovered the bike near a recycling bin. A teenage boy hid behind a shed and tried to sneak away. Torres called out across the yard. The teen stopped and surrendered. He claimed he borrowed the bike as a joke. Torres reminded him of theft laws and returned the bike to the girl. Her parents thanked him with tears in their eyes. Evening approached. Streetlights flickered on. Price checked her tablet for pending calls. The radio stayed busy. A bar fight erupted on the west side. Torres sped across town with urgency. When they arrived, two men wrestled on the sidewalk while a third tried to break them apart. Torres pulled one man back and pinned him against the wall. Price took hold of the second man and pushed him to the ground. Both smelled of alcohol. Their words slurred. Bar patrons watched with nervous faces. An ambulance treated minor cuts. The bar owner requested trespass notices. Torres issued them and told both men to stay away from the property. The ambulance transported the man with a head cut for stitches. Price photographed the scene. Torres filled out incident paperwork. Another confrontation prevented. Another long night to finish. Near midnight, dispatch alerted officers to a disturbance at a mobile home park on the outskirts of town. Reports mentioned yelling, smashed furniture, and a possible weapon. Torres drove with lights flashing but kept sirens off to avoid provoking anyone. When they arrived, residents stood outside their homes with worried looks. A woman pointed toward a unit with a broken window. Glass scattered across the porch. A man inside shouted threats. No sign of anyone else inside. Torres approached the doorway with caution. Price stayed behind cover with her hand on her taser. Torres called out for the man to step outside. The man refused. He threw a chair against the wall. Torres knocked again, louder this time. Still no cooperation. Price called for an additional unit. Within minutes, a K-9 officer arrived. Torres warned the man that the dog waited outside and any threat toward officers led to immediate action. The door opened. The man stepped out holding a hammer. His knuckles turned white. His face burned with anger. Torres ordered him to drop the hammer. The man argued weakly, then dropped it. Price cuffed him. The neighbors sighed with relief. The man broke his own window after a drunken fit. No victims. No injuries. He spent the night in jail on property destruction charges. As the night pressed on, Torres felt the weight of each call. Stress built behind his temples. His back ached. Still, he kept his posture solid. His mission stayed simple: protect the community. Guide each situation toward peace. Near 2 Crew A.M. Dispatch sent a silent alarm for a drugstore. Torres reached the location within minutes. The front door remained locked. No lights inside. The alarm triggered from the rear entrance. Torres circled the building and found a man wedged behind the dumpster. A duffel bag sat beside him. Bolt cutters lay on the ground. Torres ordered him to stand. The man tried to lie about his presence, but fresh scrape marks on the back door gave away his attempt. Price cuffed him and placed him in the patrol car. Officers reviewed security clips. The suspect faced burglary charges. Later, a senior's home requested assistance for a resident refusing medication. The nurse explained that the man struggled with dementia and believed staff tried to poison him. Torres entered quietly and sat near him. He spoke in slow, reassuring sentences. The man relaxed and allowed the nurse to administer his medicine. Torres shook his hand before leaving. Some calls required strength, others required patience. The sky darkened before dawn. Heavy clouds blocked stars. Torres stopped at a gas station for fuel. Price stretched and rubbed her arms for warmth. The clerk recognized Torres from previous calls. He offered them water. Torres thanked him and checked the patrol car tires. Rainwater dripped from the roof. The night moved slow and heavy. Dispatch sent one final call before shift change. A homeless woman stood near a closed laundromat. She refused to leave and cried into a blanket. Torres approached gently. She explained that someone stole her bag from the shelter and she lost all her clothes. She shook in the cold rain. Torres found a spare jacket and handed it to her. He called the shelter staff. They agreed to send transportation and hold a bed for her. Torres waited with her until a van arrived. She stepped inside and thanked him through tears. The shift ended. Torres drove back to the station in silence. Price dozed in the passenger seat. Her exhaustion showed in every movement. The station lights glowed faint behind rain streaks. They filed paperwork and prepared reports for detectives. Torres secured evidence in the locker. Price reviewed the drugstore footage and sent copies to investigators. The sergeant walked through the hallway and stopped next to Torres. He praised the work from the last several shifts. Chaos showed no pattern. Calls ranged from violent threats to small acts of kindness. Torres nodded. He felt the truth in every word. Some nights poured trouble with no end. Some nights balanced risk with relief. After clocking out, Torres walked outside with Price. Morning crept in with gray light. The city sat quiet after long storms. They shook hands and went separate directions. Torres drove home, parked in his driveway, and shut the car door with quiet care. He entered his house and placed his badge on the kitchen counter. The weight always felt heavier after long shifts. He sat on the couch with his eyes half closed. His phone buzzed. A message from the major. The text thanked Torres for standing firm in court. The major wrote that respect belonged to those who protected truth. Torres sent a short reply. He said the honor came from service, not rank. He closed his eyes. Hours of sleep waited. Night after night, the city spun with tense moments and small victories. Torres held no desire for praise. He fought no battles for fame. His job demanded clear words, firm choices, and steady discipline. Some saw police work as noise and lights. Torres saw faces, voices, and fragile lives holding together by threads. The man at the gas station learned the cost of false pride. The court recorded the truth. Officers collected evidence and stood by duty. The community stayed a little safer. Honor remained unbroken. Torres lay back and let fatigue pull him under. Tomorrow waited with new noise and new calls. The streets never slept. The badge never rested for long. The next video follows another shift, filled with danger, lies, and quiet courage. Torres will face a new challenge with higher stakes and no room for error. If you want a free guide that explains how real police bodycam narratives stay accurate, tight, and fast-paced, the next release includes it at no cost. Stay ready. The next story arrives soon.